We are here to talk about Reclaim Our Future, which is a vision for an action that's happening starting October 16.
No. Watch the road. Yeah, much in
I think the government actually needs to realise that we want something to happen, because they still haven't yet. Like, some people are starting to realise, but most of the government still hasn't realised that lots of people don't want it to end like this. They want something better.
Becoming involved with the rebels was, I think, a way of expressing what I'm feeling and the fear, and in a way express the sheer rage that I feel that I have to demonstrate. And I don't want to. I do not want to have to go out and demand from my government to act, to look after.
We had these catastrophic fires throughout the East Coast and elsewhere in the world. Once you come to terms with the fact that you are part of the planet, you're as much a part of nature as the trees and the bees, then it makes perfect sense that the emotions you're repressing are huge.
You know what's coming for so many people in this world? It's just terrible. We've got to do something now. This is our moment, and each of us needs to find what we can offer now, and it's different for each of us. We owe it to our kids. We owe it to our grandchildren. We owe it to all those creatures that died, all those trees, or just life.
I think we need to show people it's not over. It's still happening. People don't realise, and it needs to be recognised again. Yeah, and children have been told that they can't do this because they're children, but they actually shouldn't have to, because the adults, they were meant to do this. It was their job, but they're not doing it, so we have to help them.
We are here to talk about Reclaim Our Future, which is a vision for an action that's happening starting October 16. So the context of this was that, we've sort of been doing waves of action in ACT because there has been an appetite for it. Hold on, let me move this out of the way. Keep moving. There we go. We've had a bit of a proof of concept of those waves. So I'm going to let Tim actually go through what we've done so far.
So we hatched this idea to, I guess, escalate things and what that would look like and how we could get the change that we need without increasingly narrow amount of time to do it. And though we didn't, I guess, achieve this moniker until later, we hatched a plan to go to Canberra and to try and, I guess, do something. So we're going to go through some data and some results and tiny bit of history, I guess, in this presentation. So the first attempt, we went to Canberra in May and formed various blockades around key infrastructure regarding the movement of politicians around Canberra, with the clear messaging of saying that we're not going to let you spend all of the remaining money budget on the remaining carbon budget, so to speak. And so we escalated actions by having rebels put into prison for the first time, and found that it was at least not as difficult as it would become. And so from there, we blockaded Parliament House and did the Comcars. And Leslie did a marathon stint of doing glue-ons in order to continue that non-compliance, which is a theme that would continue, as you can see in this graph, which reflects the number of arrests over the number of people who took part in those arrests over the space of, it looks like 11 days. Nope, just 1 week. And so what we've got is 28 or 27 arrests by only 10 people. And so it starts to develop that the disruption and non-compliance escalation of this plan. It essentially involves entering into resistance and repeatedly being arrested until the state punishes you, and then using that to pose a dilemma to the judicial system and to the politicians involved. And so we'll give you a breakdown of how this all unfolded. Started on the Tuesday. There was mass action on one of the busiest streets in Canberra, right outside the APA headquarters. There was all sorts of disobedience happening. Namely, there was a tripod, 2 of them, glue on, mass road blocking, and people had done some theatrics and climbed up onto the awning outside the APA headquarters, and everyone was released. And so what happened next was they hatched a plan and went out and did it again. The next day, they upped the ante by using property damage for the first time in this context, taking that duty of care message once again to the Department of Agriculture, Water and Environment, Susan Lay's department, to carry the message clearly that refuting your duty of care to protect future generations is criminal in a climate emergency. And so rebels were prepared to up the ante in this particular action, and they were released again. And so the actions continued. On the Thursday was supposed to be another action in Canberra, although the contingent from Victoria got stuck by border closure, and so moved the action, keeping on the duty of care message, moved the action to in Melbourne, and blockaded the office of the Treasurer, Josh Frydenberg. And same thing here. Acts of non-compliance and civil disobedience were escalated, and everyone was released. And when I say released, like, people are charged, but were allowed back out into the public to continue rebelling. On the Friday, they entered the Department of Agriculture, Water and Environment, once again upping the ante by being arrested for a 3rd day in that week. Rebels did all sorts of property damage inside the building, and particularly made a call to any of the public servants willing to take part in the action as well. And that also involved some rather humorous elements and some really good speeches on the live stream. And rebels were charged, but rebels eventually found their way out of custody, and so there was a weekend of thinking, so to speak. And by the time the IPCC report came out, there was an action perfectly timed and perfectly planned to elevate that message to the nation and the world it became, and upped the ante once again with the non-compliance and escalation of actions, spray painting across the front of Parliament House, and the lodge letting off smoke flares, and the iconic setting a pram on fire. Definitely something that came on the second week of actions. That definitely wasn't planned for day one, so it sort of shows you how the strategy plays out over time. And so what did that look like in terms of results? Well, firstly, we got a huge amount of activity on social media. A lot of politicians weighed in and showed their true colors. There was a bit of media jujitsu and a whole bunch of coverage of this iconic image, which carried on to cartoons, which accurately depicted the message that was being conveyed, which is that, you know, a small amount of disruption creates stops a large amount of disruption later on, and same thing, small amount of vandalism shows the large amount of vandalism that's happening inside Parliament House, and that message was received loud and clear and was done with a remarkably small number of people. Yeah, there's another cartoon. The satire continued. This is what our sign-up data looked like on the Action Network for Extinction Rebellion, and you can see here the numbers reflect the numbers of sign-ups reflect the numbers that we were getting during the Autumn Rebellion, which took place in major capital cities around Australia. And I believe there was roughly only a team of about 40 people thereabouts involved in making these actions happen. So I guess what you can draw from this metric is that if you're willing to escalate and take your stance of resistance further, you can achieve an almost equal amount of mobilization without as many people, which is, I guess, a key learning for lockdowns and I guess the limited time window we have to act on the emergency at the moment. This is the rundown on Google. So this is, rather than new signups, this is just the amount of trending that happened with these sets of actions. You can see here we received about 32% the amount of activity that we got during the Autumn Rebellions, which is quite a remarkable feat considering there was a whole bunch of rhetoric about how going to Canberra might not yield a lot of attention compared to going to the States. So we're starting to get some pretty effective numbers on how many arrests translate to how much response on Google. And also just the amount of engagement and likes on our social media went like astronomically through the roof within this time frame, which is about a month. So this is the number of people who attended events, and again, a huge number of people took part in the events around Action Network, and it was a massive shift considering how few people were involved in organizing it. And that's the long and short of it. So imagine what we can do with 100 or 200.
Powerful dancers. So yeah, as you may have gathered from Tim, dance is disruption and non-compliance escalation. And so while Reclaim Our Future encompasses many strategies, like trying to get this mass mobilization, trying to get this 3.5% that we hear about is like the tipping point where we have to win, but also acknowledging that that is incredibly difficult, if not nigh impossible during COVID times. And so looking at the other types of strategies that can be complementary to our winning point, and that is that you get as much engagement with your sort of campaign, which is sort of a win condition, if you are willing to be as sort of radical or are more radical within yourself. So that's like several days of arrest and just that continuation and escalation. And of course, that non-compliance until imprisonment. And we ended up having, in budget week, 2 of us went to prison for a week. And then during the last round of action, 7 of us. And so we're increasing that number because it's about that mentality of saying, either we are on the street doing disruption or we are in prison, and that is our fate for the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks or however long it is. Obviously, not everybody is willing to make that much of a commitment, and so that there was 8 of us in that commitment, and we were in a team of 40. So that there's other roles to be engaged with, other people who just got arrested, not heading for prison. So don't be scared off and think the project is not for you if you can't take that prison step, but it is absolutely one of the most powerful things we can do. And our aim is that if we manage to have 60 people willing to be arrested, willing to be held on remand, it's not being charged, it's being held on remand, but in prison, then we would flood the prison system, and that would be international news if our Capital Territory prison was flooded with non-violent protesters. So that's the pitch in some ways, but there's also more to it, which is the occupation and things like that. So I'm just going to keep going with this beautiful presentation. This is Tezzy, by the way, a whole nother way around other than PowerPoint. So as you can see, we're looking at like our objectives, our goals as a team. So we're looking at pressuring the government, bringing on the doorstep of the government has proven to get more attention than just being in the state capital, the general public. Like, we had dialogues with the politicians, and I think that is so powerful, and it's really been a part of the strategy from day one. Be in front of the politicians, because they're the ones that are making the decisions, and they're the ones that we have to disrupt. And the government structure itself is all here in Canberra, and so that is quite disruptive in itself. Pressuring the government to act appropriately, and including declaring a climate emergency, and the duty of care messaging, which will continue on, and engaging with Susan by having a duty of care. And a strong public stance, because the government, this October 16 week is the last sitting before they go into the COP negotiations, which is like international climate talks. Cool. So we're also trying to influence the public to enhance their support for XR. Or civil disobedience, engage the public in climate action, promote the important role of activists to the public. Like, we are an essential service. We are an important part of democracy. We are called direct democracy, and inform them about citizen assemblies. And there's potentially an election in November, so obviously we can have an influence in that situation. And you've got the movement, so we're actually shifting the Overton window, which is like the window of appropriate response. So maybe people think it's just appropriate to send the protest, and we're shifting that over to like arrest and jail, because these more radical and sacrificial tactics are more powerful, and we are in the end game. So it is absolutely essential that we use our full arsenal. Yeah. Okay. And obviously, this is obviously an escalation. It's very challenging, but we just have to acknowledge that as a movement, so far, we have failed. We do not have the response that we need. And so we must keep pushing ourselves to be more and more radical, and more what we need to be able to survive. And yeah, this is not our first rebellion, obviously, nor will it probably be our last, but this is one of the most important dates this year, because it is the one that is right before those COP negotiations, and it's happening at our government's doorstep, or the government's doorstep. So yeah, I'm going to hand over to Sergio to talk a little bit about the timeline. How do you feel about that, Serge?
Yep, sounds good. Can do. Cool. So this is we get a little bit sophisticated. Can I get co-host, by the way? Yeah. So I have a little PowerPoint. Cool. Thank you. Okay. The first thing that I want people to pay attention to is the fact that the sort of three pillars of how this sort of movement works. We have our actions, we have getting out on the streets, and we have the drama and the media that we create from that. And then capitalizing on that drama to build the movement, we have our recruitment functions. So you can sort of see with each iteration of these waves of action. Yeah, that's what we have. So we have 7 weeks to get to the biggest citizens mobilization that this country's ever seen. So you're in the right space. Yeah, so I mean that's basically it. And what I want people to basically know is that the primary function between this point and getting to the mobilization is recruitment, and then obviously part of that recruitment and part of our work is that sort of explicit preparation for the rebellion. But obviously we need to let people know so they can come and join us. So the next slide, I just have I'm just sort of color coding action, media, and recruitment. So in standard times, the momentum-driven organizing sort of framework will suggest a sort of process a little bit like this, where basically every week you have an action, you get media from that action, you have your general meetings in your areas, you have your talks and trainings. We're going to do like some of those things, but obviously we are COVID limited. Like many places in the country are anyway. So if you don't have COVID in your area, then actions is obviously and a great way to do recruitment. So you can sort of see that that cycle of action, media, and mobilization in the sort of small steps in the lead up to the next main point of escalation. And obviously there's those sort of larger cycles too. So the next thing I'm going to present is a little bit of a weird graph, but basically what I'm want to show you is that the different working groups that we are constructing basically need more people at particular times. So what we're going to be doing in this meeting is basically getting people from this Zoom to basically working with us for many hours each week in these each sort of working group. Now this is sort of just like a off the cuff sort of presentation of my experience of organizing these kinds of rebellions, such that the main sort of items on the to-do list at the start is recruitment, media, and finance. Now obviously everything, the need of all of our working groups increases a lot as we get close to the end point, to the action date. So yeah, basically in terms of what I would suggest people personally prioritize their participation in, basically refer to this graph, aka recruitment and media, and obviously there's a bit of finance to be done as well, and strategy is also laid on top of that. And then in the later stages, so from weeks 5, 6, and 7, we're going to see a lot more activity being people being required in our arts, actions, legal, and regen. So what that means sort of functionally is that as we recruit people into the system for the first few weeks, we're going to be really getting people to work quite a lot on sort of those main 3 media, recruitment, and finance teams, and then shift into the teams that need a lot of work to be done in the lead up. And the basic situation with that is, arts, legals, regen, especially like can't actually do much work until some of the sort of core stuff is in place. Anyway, that's my sort of explanation of how we're going to do the timeline, and what I want people to each working group, one of your first action points for your team is to create your working group's sort of generalized timeline from here to the 16th of October, and then I guess the plan is to try to stick to that. Yeah, cool. I think that's about it for the timeline. Back to you.
All right, great. Thanks, Serge. So what I have here is the list of our teams. So the first team is mobilization or mass mobilization. And basically your job is to grow the movement. And growing the movement is about mobilization and retention. And so if we have a look in mobilization, basically you'd be looking at community outreach, rebel rigging, letter drop, social media, that's a huge one, email campaigns and connecting with other groups. And then, yeah, retention is training, like NVDA training and upskilling, connecting local people together, and getting people doing arts and other rebellious activities. Not supposed to have that in there. Stop. Okay, great. Then on the day, basically action logistics is the next group. And so what they do on the day on the ground, that's what they're looking for. So location logistics, props, device building, strategy, COVID contingencies, activities. If we've got basically hundreds of people sitting on the streets at once, we're going to need things to keep them entertained. Affinity group support, working out accommodation. If we have people who have higher needs and can't camp on the streets, then we will need places for them to stay, and working with legal and First Nation solidarity. Then, yeah, basically media and messaging is the next team. So they're like our voice. They come up with like great messaging and things to engage media, and they also send out all the media releases. And then, of course, art, which, you know, is such an important team because we are the beautiful rebellion, and that when we look like we belong together, we show the power of our unity across vast distances. So even if we are unable to all gather in Canberra, if we all have a similar messaging and have similar looks when we're engaging in our civil disobedience, it tells this national story. Obviously, regenerative culture is so important because we can't engage effectively unless we are strong. And that includes arrestee support, prison support, community building, COVID safety in action, and resilience education. Let's go. Finance, obviously organising the money and organising getting the money. Hello.
Yep, okay.
I'm just going to mute her. All right, great. And then our next team is, yeah, the strategy team, which is sort of an overview team that looks at everything that's going on politically and within our movement and helps guide us, because then they're sort of overview lookers rather than in the tasks. And so when you break out, you're about to break out, hopefully you've all picked your team. I'll show you the numbers again. 1, mass mobilization. 2, action. 3, media messaging. 4, art. 5, regen. 6, finance. 7, strategy. And each of those teams will have an external coordinator, which all come towards this co-ord circle, which will meet once a week. They'll share information on what's happening in their circle, and then we'll feed information back to their circle on what's going on around the movement. It's not a decision-making space, it's just a communication space. Most of the decisions we'll be trying to push into the working groups. That's how we move quickly and effectively. And in there, there'll be just one role, which is like to responsible for communicating about the project and about the meeting times. So you'll each get an email. Email is your main form of communication about the whole project, and then you'll have messages. You'll all be in Signal chats for your smaller working group. Try and be regenerative with Signal. It's a big deal. All right. So what are our actions? Hopefully you're all changing your names right now, and I have my amazing people, tech people sorting rooms out. So because we have COVID, we have to be flexible. So we have two main visions. The first and the most powerful is to reclaim the house. It's camping on the streets, or in, yeah, well, I guess Action Logistics can sort out the fine details, but camping around Parliament House day after day. An essential part of this is people willing to go to prison or be arrested day after day, because they sort of create a safety net around the people who can't do that, who sit in the middle. So, and then obviously part of that is doing creative actions that tell the story of why we're there. And then failing that, if we're completely in lockdown, then we still need to be acting. We still need to be engaging in civil disobedience, but we need to be doing it rebellion of one style. So here's Mark sitting on the road with a sign, and it's just him on the road doing a rebellion of one. Here's Sam sitting on the road with a barrel. Here's someone up a tripod by themselves. I know I wasn't acting by myself, but there's a truck. That's another great idea. Someone on a roof. So there's many ways that you can be really powerful and seem like you're acting alone, but obviously you'll have a team around you, incognito support. And obviously a huge part of that is lion. Lion is a term that we use for someone who's willing to go to prison. And so we're aiming for 60 people to be willing to go to prison. And we have roughly 30 already. So if you want to be a lion, get in touch. No one really wants to be a lion. Obviously, it's terrifying, but I've done it twice and I survived, and I feel super empowered by it. Cool. So that's our vision. You're all going to go away into your workspaces now.